The lobbyists who want to undo what we did in the vote go to work the morning after the election, and they undo it again and again and again. We have to hang in there. We have to stick with it. We have to go on after the election, and we have to go after the issues we want. We have to get behind Andy Bellick and give him a strong wind at his back so that every other politician knows that they're going to run into a tornado unless they turn around and go in the same direction he's going. That has to be the attitude, or it's not going to work. And it can be done. So my answer to these people, as I go around to these audiences like yours, who ask me, can we do it? I would say, well, you know, in Colorado, they passed this constitutional amendment. And in CTAC, you know, they voted for a $15 minimum wage. And in Tennessee, the governor, the Republican governor with the Republican legislature has decided on free tuition for community college for any kid who graduates from a state high school. Now let's think about capitalism. That's another issue. Aren't all businesses just out to make maximum money? Isn't that what it is? Maximum return to shareholders, nothing else. Well, I've got a section on my website called Inclusive Capitalism. And what's interesting is to discover who's involved in some other kind of capitalism besides maximizing profit. Employees to do community work. In fact, one of them just floated an IPO, an initial public offering on Wall Street this past spring, and everybody on Wall Street said, oh, this is crazy. This isn't a real company. They're not after what we're after on Wall Street. This is going to be a flop. The company floated, its name is Etsy. The company floated a stock option. With its stock price at $16, by the end of the first day of trading, its stock price had gone up to $30 and it raised $300 million on Wall Street. So it turns out that even on Wall Street, people like a company with a heart. 5 years ago, there was not a single law in any state in America that legalized public benefit corporations. Maryland was the first one to pass it in 2010. Today, there are 27 states that have public benefit corporations, and I hate to tell you, I don't know if Washington's one of them. I think you probably are. My point is that change is underway. So there we have Seattle and CTAC with minimum wage of $15 an hour. Up in Maine and Connecticut, candidates using public financing. Okay? Colorado voting for the amendment to the Constitution. Tennessee taking on student debt with free community college tuition. California has the kind of law that Andy Bellick was trying to pass here. It's a model law. We have been hung up in our efforts, in the federal efforts, to try to bring dark money out, to expose it, to make our elections transparent. We've been hung up for the last 1970s, hung up since the 1970s, over whether or not groups call themselves political committees. Are they political action committees? Well, if they are, then they've got to report their donations and expenditures. But call yourself a social welfare organization, a 501c4, like the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts or the Red Cross, or Crossroads America, or Americans for Prosperity. If you recognize those are huge money-generating political action committees, but they don't call themselves that. Well, under federal law, they're not having to disclose. California passed a very simple law. They said, we don't care whether you call yourself a political action committee or a social welfare organization. But if you spend $50,000 in a California election in any way, for an ad, for a campaign, for a registration drive, whatever, if you spend $50,000, you must register and report all your donations. Very simple law, very simple law. My belief is that people are so exercised and so concerned about this country that if, and the direction we're headed in, that if they only knew what was going on in other places, they would take heart and get engaged and do something in their own states. That's what has to happen. It has to happen here. Jay Hyman has got to get 200,000 signatures to put that amendment, the Constitution, on the ballot in 2012. If you're in this room, you've got to help him do that. It has to be there, because if you put that issue in front of the voters of the state of Washington, you will return the same kind of verdict that the voters did in Colorado. And if you do it in Washington, you do it in Oregon, it's already been done in California. And if you do it in New Hampshire, and you start doing it in Tennessee and other places, there are going to be enough states. Are we going to get an amendment to the Constitution? I don't know. But I do know from lifelong experience in Washington, if you turn the heat up enough from the grassroots, politicians, even those who've been looking you in the face and doing the opposite, will turn around. But you have to be in there, you have to hang in there, and you have to keep going after it. So my message to you is, this is the time when we have a chance in America to generate a new progressive era. What does progressive era mean? Think back to the early 20th century, early 1900s. Teddy Roosevelt busting trusts. The women's suffragette movement calling for vote for the women, constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment, 16th Amendment for the income tax. The amendment to the Constitution for direct election of senators. You know, those things are so built into our life, we forget that there ever was a time when we didn't have them. People like us a century ago fought to get those things done. Those changes came from the bottom up. Those changes hit Washington from the outside in. I can tell you as a reporter who spent much of the last 50 years, I'm embarrassed to say how long it's been, but certainly the last 30, 35 years, in that city, I wrote a book called The Power Game, How Washington Works. I wrote a book called Rethinking America. I wrote a book called Who Stole the American Dream? And I can tell you, I lost faith that Washington is going to change things. They might chip away at things a little bit here and there. If change is going to occur in America, if we are going to move this country in the direction that we know it has to move in, and that we want it to move in, we have to do it ourselves. And Martin Luther King would try to help these people begin to bind up their wounds, not just their physical wounds, but their psychic wounds. And he'd go around and he'd give these speeches, and they were very moving. But there was something that he said that stuck in my mind that seems really relevant today. They used to denounce him in the South as an outside adjective. They would say, you know, that guy comes in here, our people are happy. Everything's okay in Charleston. Right? Everything's okay in Baltimore. Everything's okay in New York. Everything's okay in Ferguson, Missouri, right? You get my point. Everything's okay. It's just these, at that time, these outside agitators that came in. They call him an agitator. They said, you're an outside agitator. Our people are happy here. You're coming in and you're agitating and you're causing the problem. And there was a real denunciation. And I listened to King's response. And it was wonderful. He said, yes, he said, I am an agitator. He said, think of your washing machine. If you look in your washing machine, there's an agitator in the center of your washing machine. And it is stirring up the water, and it's stirring up the soap, and it's knocking the dirt out of your clothes. He said, I'm here to agitate, to knock the dirt of Jim Crow and racial discrimination and racism and segregation out of this society. What's relevant to me today is we need a new generation of agitators. And by that, I don't mean the young, I mean all of us. And those of us who are older, to whom the stories I just told you about Martin Luther King and the time when bipartisan politics worked and the time when there was more shared prosperity, those of us who are old enough to remember those days need to share our experience and link up with younger people. And what was interesting was that the powers that be, Kennedy in the White House and Johnson and the mayor of Washington and the police chief, they were scared stiff that there was going to be a horrible race riot. It was going to be just like Birmingham, but worse. And either the speakers would work the crowd into a frenzy and they'd go on a rampage right through downtown Washington, or the segregationists would come rolling in from rural Maryland and rural Virginia and they would attack the crowd and there'd be a race battle. The next day, Russell Baker wrote in the New York Times, It was one of the most graceful, peaceful armies that Washington has ever seen. 200,000, 250,000 people. And King comes and he says, everybody remembers that soaring anguish refrain, I have a dream. I have a dream that one day America will live up to its promises. One day my children will be recognized by their character and not the color of their skin. But people forget that what he also said is, we have come here today to cash a promissory note from American democracy, embodied in the words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, that all men are equal and all men and women are entitled to those inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we're here to cash that check, and we refuse to believe that the treasury of democracy is bankrupt because you've given us a bad check. And we now want the nation to live up to its promise to its people. We want the nation today to live up to its promise to its people. That people who work hard get a decent living. They don't have to depend on food stamps and public welfare. We want to know that the votes that are counted honest. We want to know that people who are residents of a state can vote and they're not kind of shenanigans to keep them out of it. We want to know, let me tell you, we haven't even got into it, gerrymandering is one of the worst problems we have all over the country. Do you know that 90% of the districts in the House of Representatives aren't even competitive? They're political monopolies, organized by both parties to keep themselves in office. We have to get back to the spirit of that civil rights movement. We have to understand, as I said up above on this website, it's up to us. We have to understand they're not going to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now. Now is the time. Pick the issue, get engaged, use this wonderful organization that you have, Fix Democracy First. And by the way, that slogan is not just a clever slogan. It is a very wise slogan. Why? Because if you look at any major issue that we need to deal with in this country, climate change, immigration, education reform, healthcare, transportation, foreign trade, national debt, student debt, whatever it is, Washington cannot deal with it because it's gridlocked because of money and gerrymandering. Okay? So fixing democracy first should be everybody's first issue, because you can't get to their first issue if you don't fix democracy first. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. Now is tomorrow.